The first full year in the big leagues was certainly better for Jackson Holliday, but we know there's a couple more levels for him to get to. We'll still break down that 2025 season coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, October 23rd, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we continue our Orioles player season review series as we take a look at the first full big league season for Jackson Holliday. We'll talk about what went right for his season. He's able to stick in the big leagues and be the Orioles leadoff hitter for most of the year. We'll talk about what went wrong with some weird spikes and downs of his walk and strikeout rates and his struggles against the fastball and some defense that needs a little bit work. And then we'll chat a little bit about his biggest storylines heading into 2026. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So our player review series marches on here. We're going from top to bottom in terms of FanGraphs WAR for each of the Orioles players that are kind of remaining on the 40-man roster at this point. And today, so far, is our sixth installment of the series. We've already done Gunnar Henderson, Trevor Rogers, Dean Kramer, Jordan Westburg, and Cade Povich. So make sure to go back and check those out. Next up on our list is 21-year-old left-handed hitting second baseman Jackson Holliday, the Orioles' #1 overall pick out of high school in the 2022 draft, who climbed to the majors quickly, made his big league debut in April of 2024. However, he had a little bit of struggles at age 20. He was sent back down to the minor leagues for a while, came back up late last season, was a little bit better, but still couldn't fully find his footing. But this year, kind of more so secured himself an opening day roster spot and was on this team for the entirety of the season. Final stats for Jackson Holliday. He played in 149 games this season with 649 plate appearances. So it really gives you a sample size of a full year here at age 21. Hit .242 with a .314 on base and a .375 slugging. Tied for the team lead with 17 homers. Was right up there in second with 17 stolen bases as well. He drove in 55 runs. That all led to a 96 WRC plus, which is a 4% worse than league average hitter. He struck out about 22% of the time, walked about 9% of the time, and that all led to a 1.2 WAR, according to FanGraphs, for Jackson Holliday. Let's start for Holliday with what went right in his 2025 season. And the first thing is that he just stuck in the big leagues for the entire year. I mean, of course, he did debut early in 2024, as I mentioned, but after some big time struggles, he spent a large chunk of last season in AAA and honestly injured in AAA for a little bit of that before he came back up in late July. But even in those final 2 months of last year when he was on the roster and the Orioles were injured, you had Westburg and Arias go down at third base last year at one point. The Orioles were kind of counting on more of Emmanuel Rivera than they were of Jackson Holliday. And that's not where they expected to be. But at age 20, he was just coming along a little bit slower in the big leagues. This year, he stuck around. He was the Orioles starting second baseman. He played 149 games, and that came with health. And you can't say that for a lot of Orioles. He was one of the very few Orioles to spend the majority of this year on the team and not end up on the injured list at any point. Now, that doesn't mean he avoided injury. He missed a couple of games in September with a knee issue that he said had been bothering him on and off for parts of the season, but never actually went on the injured list. At worst, I mean, if you were to put Holliday's season at the base level, at worst, you could say he got a whole bunch of chances to learn at just 21 years old in the big leagues, and certainly wasn't great, but held his own, right? A 96 WRC plus, basically a league average hitter at 21. You will absolutely take that. And that is what I talked about when we previewed Holliday's season back in spring training. I basically was like, look, if Holliday can set a baseline of being at least a league average hitter and play most of this year, I'll be happy going into next year. I was hoping for a little bit better offense, but he was at least right around league average. And the other nice part was, even if this isn't his role long-term, and we'll get to this at the end of the show, he got to stick in the leadoff spot for most of the season. Holliday hit leadoff for the first time this year on May 10th. That was actually while Brandon Hyde was still the Orioles manager. It was about a week and a half after that he got fired. And every time Holliday was in the lineup from May 10th on, he was hitting in the leadoff spot. Now, Mancelino kind of gave him the go-ahead and say, hey, we're not going to platoon him. He's going to be hitting leadoff every single day unless he needs a day off for injury or rest. And that is what happened for the remainder of the year. And that kind of allowed him to just settle in as a league average hitter, right? And when he has a 62 WRC plus last season in just over 200 plate appearances, if you can get that up to 96, get that up around league average, you feel a lot better from year to year. And the ability to just play almost every day allowed some of his skills to shine, right? Now, the Orioles didn't hit for a ton of power this year, but the 17 home runs he hit did tie for the team lead. That was nice to see. His 9.6% walk rate was up from last year, and it was at least, 8.6% walk rate was at least closer to the high walk rates in the minors. I don't think they're ever going to get up to like the 18 to 20% walk rates he had in the minor leagues. It's kind of almost impossible to do in the big leagues, but he had a 13% walk rate in the second half after the All-Star break. That was top 25 in Major League Baseball. And if you pare it down even more, and I know this kind of feels like a random date to pick out, but it's at least convenient because Holliday walked 3 times in a single game on August 10th against the A's. From that point on, he posted a 16.8% walk rate. That was 6th best in Major League Baseball. Here are the 5 qualified hitters that walked more than Jackson Holliday from August 10th till the end of the year: Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Wyatt Langford, Shohei Ohtani, and Mike Trout were the 5 guys above Holliday. That's a pretty good list to be on. And it's not like they were walking Holliday because they were scared to pitch to him. That's generally what happens with Judge and Ohtani and sometimes Trout and Soto as well. He was earning those walks, which makes it even more impressive because he hasn't established himself as a hitter like those other guys have. And it helped that, he dropped his chase rate down to 22%. That's one of the better numbers in baseball this year. I mean, he's not swinging and chasing pitches outside of the strike zone a whole lot. And he did cut the strikeout rate. It was 33.2% last year. That is way, way too high. All the way down to 21.6% this year is a good number. You can be a really good player with a 22% strikeout rate. And that is what Jackson Holliday was able to put up. And again, you take that August 10th date when he had the 3 walks, he had more walks than strikeouts, 31 walks to 30 strikeouts from August 10th through the remainder of the season. His strikeout rate was down at 17% in the second half. That amount of contact and balls he was putting in play, those things are going to help him as he moves forward and hopefully takes another step in the right direction at age 22 next year. And the offense, I would say, was a mixed bag that ended up being a league average guy at 21. You will absolutely take that this year from Jackson Holliday. The other parts of the game were a little concerning. We'll talk a bit about the specific concerning parts of the offense and the defense and the base running. What was really going on there with him? That is what went wrong in Jackson Holliday's season, and it's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Just pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And FanDuel's great because it gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, try player props, and even follow the live lines during games. And it makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Rugiet. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. And when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. That is where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. And if prescribed, the treatment ships discreetly right to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private. It's all handled by real doctors. So visit rugiet.com/lockedonmlb to get 15% off your first order. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnMLB. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnMLB so they know that we sent you. That's Rugiet. Stop making excuses and start making moves. So for Jackson Holliday, there were absolutely some positives to take out of his first full season in the big leagues in 2025. And it's always good perspective to remember, even though he was a number one pick, he was just 21 years old, one of the youngest players in Major League Baseball this year. And you hope and you have to think with all his prowess, he's going to get better with age. Now we do have to talk about what went wrong in Holliday's season. Let's start with, I don't know if you would specifically put this in the what went wrong category. It was more of like the what was weird about his offensive season category, but I decided to stick it in the wrong section. Despite the fact that, as I talked about, the strikeouts went way down, the walks went up, it looked more like, in terms of, batter's eye, the Jackson Holliday we were promised, his overall production at the plate actually went down as the season went on, even though his strikeout to walk numbers also got better. Now, not fully down, but let me phrase it differently. It didn't go up the full production as much as it should have, with him walking way more and striking out less. Jackson Holliday, I mentioned that date of August 10th, right? He had more walks than strikeouts and was one of the league leaders in walks from August 10th on. He had a 99 WRC plus from August 10th on. So basically, just like the rest of the season, he was a league average hitter despite his walks spiking. Generally kind of means he was getting less hits to go along with those walks. And here's the weird thing, right? First half of the season, 5% walk rate, 25% strikeout rate. That's a really low walk rate. Strikeout rate's kind of high, not crazy high, but not where you want. In the first half, he had a 103 WRC plus, so he was above league average as a hitter. Second half, walks almost triple, up to 13%. Strikeouts down from 25 to 17%. You're like, all right. He was a league average hitter with little walks, lots of strikeouts. He changes that. Now we're going to see the real version of Jackson Holliday. And instead, even with the higher walks and the lower Ks, he drops with all those walks and little strikeouts. He was 14% worse than league average in the final 2.5 months of the season. He was getting on base, but it was really only via the walk. His batting average went down. His hits in general went down. He wasn't impacting the ball nearly as much. Even when they were hits, they were mostly singles. We weren't seeing a lot of extra base hits. And the month of May was his best month. He had a 127 WRC plus. He had a 52% hard hit rate, but he also had a minuscule 3% walk rate in the month of May. In August, he walked more than he struck out, but his hard hit rate was down 20% and he had an 81 WRC plus. It's kind of a wild sequence. Some of it is because, again, when he's making contact, not impacting the ball nearly as hard, but he also basically didn't barrel the ball at all by the time we got to September, just not making good contact. And it was less contact. Sometimes that's okay because the less contact led to more walks and more on base. He was being more selective. He was swinging less, but there seemed to be also something else going on. And I think what it was for Jackson Holliday, and this is a little bit of a scary thing to have wrong in your offensive game, but not something you can't still fix as he's sitting here at age 21, is that he did struggle with the fastball, especially with high velocity fastballs. And that is something that can be a little bit concerning if you are struggling with high velocity fastballs, because a lot of Major League Baseball in 2025 and into 2026 is about high velocity fastballs. Guys are throwing harder than they ever have. Now for Holliday, down the stretch, he saw more fastballs. Now, just for an example, he saw 52% of his pitches were fastballs, four-seamers or sinkers in July. That was up to 62% of the pitches he saw in September were fastballs. And the reason why was opposing pitchers were reading the scouting reports. He was struggling to hit fastballs. He was staying on the breaking balls, so they threw more and more fastballs. Combined in the months of August and September, when his walks went up, but his overall production went down, he hit just 127 against fastballs, did not have a single extra base hit. All those very few hits were singles, with a 36% hard hit rate and a 1% barrel rate against fastballs. That's not good. And the expected stats were not much better. And he wasn't swinging and missing a ton against fastballs. It wasn't a whiff issue. He was making contact, but the contact was bad. And you can tell, if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, I'm going to throw up some charts here from StatCast and Baseball Savant, just kind of showing how pitchers were attacking Jackson Holliday in those final 2 months. You can kind of see here is the attack plan on four-seamers and sinkers from both left-handed and right-handed pitchers against Holliday, and you can see kind of, a mix around the strike zone, and then bright red up and away. Basically, the large majority of the fastballs in any count, this just isn't with 2 strikes, this is in any count, were up and away to Jackson Holliday. And it's because they kind of found a hole in his swing. That is generally not what you want to see. This is the strikeout percentage graph for Jackson Holliday against fastballs in those final 2 months. You can see up and away in the zone over 40%, up and away out of the zone well over 30%. Attacking him up and away was how you got him. But as I mentioned, he wasn't swinging and missing like a bad amount, right? That wasn't the key issue, was the swing and miss. So even when you look at, okay, what was happening when he was making contact on these fastballs up in the zone, this graph is the crazy one. This is his batting average against 4-seamers and sinkers in the final 2 months of the year. All 3 quadrants in the upper part of the zone did not have a single hit on, didn't have a single hit up and away, out of the zone as well. It didn't have to be up and away. It could be just anywhere up with a fastball. Holliday didn't have a single hit on a high fastball in the final 2 months of the season. That is clearly opposing pitchers finding a plan, finding a hole in his swing, and attacking it time and time again. Now, the one thing that was good from Holliday is I think he kind of knew this by the end of the season. And what he could do is lay off some of those pitches. So if a guy missed up high with the fastball, Holliday did a pretty good job of laying off and being able to work his walks. Pitchers were more willing to go out of the strike zone because they knew up high he couldn't hit the ball. And Holliday's batter's eye was good enough to lay off some of them and draw more walks later. But when guys were having better command and getting them in the zone at the top, Holliday knew he had to swing because he has a great command of the zone, and he just wasn't making any good contact on those pitches, even though he was generally contacting the ball. And if you kind of sort by higher velocity, so if you sort by fastballs that were 96 miles per hour or higher, guys you would generally call high velo guys, whether they were starters or relievers, those stats get even worse, which makes sense, but the stats get even worse the higher the velocity goes. That is a bit of a concern. It's something he's going to have to address, whether it is an approach issue. It might be one of those bat angle issues, kind of attack angle issues, might have to flatten his swing a little bit to be able to make better contact against those high pitches. That's something Holliday may want to consider this offseason. Now, some of the issues also just overall offensively were he still didn't really hit lefties, right? Like even when we saw Holliday in the lineup last year, it was mostly against right-handed pitching, which is fine. If you're in a platoon there, you're still in the large side of the platoon as a left-handed hitter because you face more right-handed pitchers than you do lefties. But this year, he hit 200 with a 62 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. It was better than last year. He did cut his strikeout rate down a ton against lefties, and I think he'll get better and better against left-handed pitching. It's always going to be something where he's just going to be better against righties. That's just going to be the reality, but he definitely showed signs of improvements, especially late in the season. It's just still something you couldn't count on him yet. And while it was cool that Holliday played every day, his performance warranted, if the Orioles were in the race, let's take a spot where the Orioles are in the race late in the season, and they don't trade Ramon Urias, he's probably platooning with Urias, and Urias is probably playing against lefties down the stretch because Holliday just really was not producing against left-handed pitchers. But once they were out of it, it made more sense to give him those at-bats against lefties, which he got the entire year, and hopefully that helps him improve in those spots into next year. And then really there's 2 other things that went wrong, and they're outside of hitting. The first one is defense. It was not very good this year. So last year, limited time at second base because he was up and down, and it was kind of a new position for him, right? He had played some second in the minors, but was mostly playing shortstop throughout the minor leagues. That was his natural position, but he got in there at second base last season, and he played, 50? Started 52 games at second base, played, just over 450 innings over there, and he had played about 300 some innings there in AAA, so he got used to it. And the underlying stats, it was a +1 outs above average. That's an above average defensive second baseman in a fairly new position at age 20. You were feeling real good about where Jackson Holliday's defense was at. And then you didn't this year, because in 2025, he was a -6 fielding run value. That's the StatCast kind of run value stat for fielding that shows how many runs you cost or help your team on defense. Basically saying he cost the Orioles 6 runs on defense, and a -8 outs above average made Jackson Holliday the 4th worst defensive second baseman in Major League Baseball this year. Now, he was great coming in on balls. He's got that down to a pat. That's kind of comes with being a shortstop. You got to be ready for that. He was +6 on balls coming in. He was fine, moving to his left over towards the hole, closer to first base. But when he had to move to his right, so that his balls hit closer to up the middle, moving to your right when you're a second baseman, -12 outs above average when moving to his right. Essentially, more or less, that means that he is picking up 12 fewer outs than an average second baseman on balls hit to his right. That is absurdly bad. He was basically the worst infielder when moving to his right in Major League Baseball this year. It's kind of so bad you can't understand it because, again, he was a good defensive shortstop coming up through the minor leagues, and parts of his game at second look good, and it's a different position, but it's still the middle infield. And it's not just a statistical thing, right? Like, if you remember Ramon Urias for the past couple of years, remember he won the Gold Glove a couple of years ago, and then he had a terrible outs above average after that. And then he kind of evened back out this year. And you're like, defensive metrics are kind of the least far along metrics, and they're the ones you want to take, I think, with the biggest grain of salt still. I have said that multiple times on this show, and you could see it with Urias. It's like, where are they getting this? But with Holliday, him being degraded for his defense to his right, when you see him field a ball, even if he fields it and throws it and gets the out at first base on a ball that's hit to his right up the middle, he just looks awkward as anything when making those plays. He's stumbling. He's on his back heels. It doesn't show good footwork. Yeah, there's things to work on offensively. The number one thing I'm doing if I'm Jackson Holliday this offseason is working on grounders to my right, because it's kind of a disaster watching him try and do that. Now, the stats say it got better. They say it was a +1 overall outs above average in September. So maybe he was making some changes, but those plays are kind of ugly when Holliday tries to make them. And I think he has the athleticism to be better at that. It's just going to take a whole lot of work down there. And again, it's still a fairly new position for him, even though it is one that is close to his usual of shortstop. Final thing that went wrong is base running. Now, Jackson Holliday stole 17 bases, second on the team. You love to see that. The Orioles were more aggressive, especially once Tony Mansolino took over. They stole more bases. And Holliday stated in spring training to the media, he said one of his goals for this season was to steal 20 bases. And he got 17. He almost got there. And that's good to see. But he was also 17 out of 28 attempting steals. That is a real bad percentage. 11 caught stealings was the most of any player in Major League Baseball this year. You're right behind him. Maikel Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., and Zach Neto all got caught 9 times. They were tied for second place. But all those guys stole in the 20s and 30s of bases, so it's a little more understandable. Holliday only stole 17 and got caught 11 times. That is one of the worst ratios you're going to see for a stolen base threat. And again, he's got good sprint speed. StatCast puts him in the 82nd percentile. He's a fast runner. You can see it. But it is another great example of being fast does not make you a good base runner, and being slow does not make you a bad base runner. Those are separate skills. Juan Soto and Josh Naylor each stole 30 bases this season. Both of those guys are slow, but they are both good base runners, know when to go, know how to time out a pitcher, know what kind of lead to get. And sometimes that comes with being a veteran player. Again, Holliday's 21 in his first full big league season, but he had a -3 base running value at StatCast, basically saying he cost the Orioles 3 runs on the bases this year. Wasn't very good at taking the extra base as well, like things like going first to third. It's some couple of fundamental things that Holliday definitely needs to work on. But again, this is all under the umbrella of he's 21 in the big leagues. This stuff will get better. He's too talented and coming from a big league family for it not to get better for Jackson Holliday. So with all of that in mind, we know Holliday's going to be back on this team, and more than likely he'll be the opening day second baseman for the Orioles next year. But what are his biggest storylines and biggest questions heading into 2026? We'll get to that to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Every day we make decisions, but on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Playing Prize Picks is such a fun and simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you are in the game. And for me, I got a busy schedule. It's great how quick it is. You can make your Prize Picks lineup in under a minute. leaves time in your schedule. And there's a new injury reboot feature. So if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it doesn't count against you. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. And that's at Prize Picks. It's good to be right. So for Jackson Holliday, after a pretty average season, but the fact that he's 21 makes you feel a little bit better about it going into next year. I think we're under the understanding the Orioles probably aren't going to bring in a big name infielder. If they bring in a bat, it's going to be an outfielder or a first baseman and a DH. I think Holliday is pretty much solidified to be the Orioles opening day second baseman for next year. That I don't think is really a question as long as he's healthy. So the big storylines for him for next year. First is, will he take another step forward at age 22? He definitely took a step forward from 2024 to 25. Can he do it again next season? What we want to see is an impactful bat, right? A 110 or better WRC plus, a legitimately well above league average hitter. And he doesn't have to be the leadoff guy, but is he producing for you, showing off the power, the speed combo, getting those walks, cutting down on the strikeouts, but hitting the ball with more positive impact, right? Maybe cleaning up the swing a little bit flatter so he can get to those high fastballs, finding a hole in his swing and fixing a hole in his swing. Everything that Holliday's done to get better, I have confidence that him and Matt Holliday and the Orioles hitting coaches and everyone will combine to get him to knock off some of those holes in his game. Even if he does, though, I think a bigger question is, will he continue to hit leadoff? I mean, we will see whether Tony Mansolino is back. I think it's, again, more likely the Orioles will hire an outside manager to manage this team. There will still be input from the front office on how they construct this lineup, but the new manager will get a say as well. It'll be interesting to see, with Holliday running those high walk rates and higher on base rates at the end of the season, does that allow him to at least continue to try him in the leadoff spot? Or do the Orioles bat him, 7th, 8th, or 9th to begin next year, let him get cooking a little bit better with the offense, and then eventually still see him as a good leadoff hitter for this team, and maybe a Jordan Westberg, Dylan Beavers, and Adley Rutschman potentially hits leadoff for the Orioles at the beginning of next year? That is a big question. I think they'll lean more towards he'll be at the bottom of the lineup to begin the year and then kind of prove the offensive prowess. And I think long-term, he would fit really well in that leadoff spot for the Orioles, but it's good that he got a lot of that seasoning to do that in a lower pressure environment with the O's kind of out of it for most of the second half of this year. But I think those are the two big offensive questions for him, probably because, again, I think he's penciled in, at least at this point, to the starting lineup. There's just things to get better, but there always is, usually, for guys who are 21 years old in the big leagues. I think the other big question is, can he clean up those other skills, right? I don't know if I need him to be a Gold Glover at second who's stealing 35 bases a year, but can we clean up the base running, not get caught stealing as much? Can we clean up the defense and get yourself to like a league average defensive second baseman? That'll help his value to this team tremendously, because you're going to have a good third baseman at Westberg. Gunnar got so much better at shortstop this year. You'll have him over there. We'll kind of see how first base shakes out for the Orioles, but if it is Ryan Mountcastle, he's very good over at first base. Holliday could set you up to have a really good defensive infield, but he's going to need to work on that and those balls going to his right. But none of this really concerns me a ton because, again, he is 21 years old, and most players improve from age 21 to 22. Most players have holes in their game if they're in the major leagues at age 21. A lot of guys at age 21 are in single A. A lot of guys at age 21 are still playing in college, and Holliday's been in the major leagues for over a full season at this point. So he's still ahead of his peers. I still think there's a ton of talent in there. Is it possible that he's not like the perennial all-star level player that the Orioles expected when they drafted him number one? It's possible, but it is insanely way too early to make any kind of statement, yes or no, about what Holliday is going to be moving forward. Let's see another full season with him making some adjustments, and then we can kind of go from there on maybe what the career would look like for Jackson Holliday. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel wherever you listen as well. If you could subscribe to the show, follow it, really helps us out. If you want to leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I certainly appreciate those. And if you want to reach out to me, reach out to the show, ask a question, a mailbag question, talk some ball, even give some feedback for the show, I certainly appreciate it. You can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Coming up tomorrow, one more episode this week. The Toronto Blue Jays are in the World Series. it could have been the Orioles. And honestly, this year's Blue Jays could be a blueprint for the 2026 Orioles. And I'll tell you why coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.